The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
You've been doing some testing on drought tolerant hybrids.
Right.
One of the things you talked about was, really taking a close look at company recommendations. They're all a little different, and you really need to talk to people to figure out where these hybrids fit.
Right. So the first thing about drought-tolerant hybrid is basically no single company will ever have the silver bullet that will achieve, miraculous drought tolerance in spite of the kinds of conditions. The kind of conditions we faced in 2012, company products that are touted as being drought tolerant achieved in some cases an incremental gain, in other cases no gain, and everything depends in terms of the intensity of the drought and the duration of the drought and the time of corn development during which that drought was present. And so I believe that it is important for producers to really look closely at the relative drought tolerance of the hybrids that they want to plant. That's an additional factor that they should look at besides things like yield and disease tolerance. And so to perhaps add to that list, look at the drought tolerance. But don't just stop with looking at the drought tolerance of the hybrid. Consider also when those hybrids with the particular planting date are going to flower. And if you really want to reduce the risk of drought stress during the flowering period when it costs the most in terms of yield, then it is essential to try to spread out the corn flowering window for the number of fields that a farmer may plant. And so key to one of my recommendations was essentially planting a mixture of early and later maturing hybrids in the same week rather than planting all of the late maturing hybrids in your first week of planting and all of your later maturing hybrids in the second or third week of planting. And so try to have a mixture there of flowering times from within the same planting week origin, you might say. And so I think, we had a terrible vulnerability in Indiana in part because of the fact that the majority of flowering was occurring when the air temperatures were well above 35 degrees Celsius and when there was no water. Now, had our planting window been wider and had it continued longer when we did get rains, in some cases in late July or in some cases early August, I think we would have had a much better yield result.
The final thing you talked about was basically just maybe growers need to be more conservative on their plant populations.
Yes, plant populations are going up, as well they should in a conventional sense, because hybrids are increasing in their yield potential, in part because they can be grown at higher plant populations and still produce an ear. The difficulty is that if we push plant populations too high, we have to be aware of the fact that that increases the risk of yield loss when you have severe drought. And this year, part of the low yield that occurred in Indiana was because of plant populations which were definitely too high for those conditions. And so what I'm recommending is perhaps a more conservative approach to choosing the plant density. Choosing the plant density not solely in line with what the seed company recommendations are, but to realize the vulnerabilities that you have to stress on your particular farm, perhaps because of sandy knolls or perhaps because of a rainfall expectation or perhaps a soil structure situation, and just realizing that somewhat lower populations are perhaps preferable to help you survive in these weather stress situations.
Now, a final comment from you on drought tolerance versus drought resistance. Sometimes the terms are used interchangeably. You don't want to hear people talking about drought resistance.
No, I never want to hear people use the word drought resistant, because corn will never become drought resistant, and those that claim that there's such a thing are liars. Basically, there is only one term that I think would be fair to use, and that would be, a degree of drought tolerance. And then within that, I think there's also the realization that different companies will be working on different avenues, above ground and below ground, in terms of the corn plant in order to try to achieve improved drought tolerance. But expect incremental improvements and not silver bullets.
Good stuff. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.